Yeah, you just hit that button. Excellent. Looks like we gotta probably close this window or hide it. Just hide the video panel. That's not what I want to do. I'm gonna hide this panel. Why is this panel
Closing
here?
meeting control,
What's that?
like that one, yeah.
See, hide.
Loading meeting.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, great. Okay, thank you, everybody, for your patience. I appreciate it. Welcome to week 7 of the Conversations in Environmental Communication seminar series here in the program on the environment. I appreciate everybody joining us in person and online via Zoom or YouTube. It's my extreme pleasure to introduce Lynn Knapp. She's a Senior Associate at Cascadia Consulting Group. Her presentation today is titled Yikes, More Clogged Pipes, Using Social Marketing to Improve Systems Outcomes. And I'm really excited to talk about social marketing and all that it entails, especially as it relates to communication, especially environmental communication. So I'm hoping that everybody here has questions for our speaker, everybody online. When the time comes, please feel free to raise your little digital hand if you want to ask your question out loud, or at least just type your questions into the chat, and we'll make sure that we ask those of Lynn. So now it's time for me to do your bio. You ready?
I'm sorry.
Okay, so Lynn Knapp is a Senior Associate at Cascadia Consulting Group. Lynn joined Cascadia in 2015. Wow. She currently manages business sustainability and behavior change projects for clients such as Seattle Utilities and event coordination for Seattle Parks and Recreation's Green Seattle Partnership Program and Stewardship Partners. Through her business sustainability outreach, Lynn has assisted hundreds of businesses to take action regarding recycling and composting, water conservation, pollution prevention, and saving energy. Before coming to Cascadia, Lynn worked in administrative and event planning roles, as well as interning with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, doing fish genetics.
Yeah.
That's cool. She has a BS in environmental science and a minor in sociology from Huxley College, which is actually where I went to school for my undergraduate as well at Western Washington University. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome. Thank you. Please.
Thank you for the intro. I won't repeat all of that now at the beginning of this. So today we're really gonna have a conversation about how utilities and really sort of like the broader community can foster behavior change through the application of social marketing principles. Raise your hand if you have heard of social marketing in some of the classes that you've been in. It's not social media, but have you heard of social marketing at all? It's fine if you haven't, just curious. Cool, so I'm going to talk about it then. So I usually co-present this presentation with my colleague, Rachel Garrett, who works at another consulting firm and leads strategic communications for them. She works for Brown and Caldwell. You can't really see it at the bottom of the screen here. But because she works at the Denver office, I'm going to be presenting sort of her portion of this presentation today. So I have some notes on it, but I do appreciate if you sort of have questions as I go through. If you want to ask them, I know we usually save time for Q&A at the end, but if you want to stop me at any point and ask a question, please go ahead and do that. And I can reiterate it for folks that are online. So we'll move this over here. So today we're really going to talk about toilets a lot, like I mentioned. I'm going to explain what community-based social marketing is and what it isn't. And we're going to walk through the key steps of that process. Then I'm going to give a snapshot of the problem as it relates to Seattle's sewer system. Then we're going to talk about a case study that we did at University of Washington, a campaign we did at UW, as well as at Seattle U and Seattle Pacific University. As a note, I'm going to say SPU a lot throughout this conversation. I'm talking about Seattle Public Utilities, but we also did this campaign at Seattle Pacific University. So sorry if that gets confusing, but generally I'll refer to Seattle Pacific for Seattle Pacific University. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can use social marketing for other principles other than talking about toilets and clogs. So let me go to my next slide here. What is social marketing? So social marketing is a practice that combines social psychology and marketing, based principles and techniques to change behavior that benefit the public good. So it's a field of research that came about primarily in the health field. Some examples of behaviors that this methodology was applied to sort of back in the early 90s was really all around stopping smoking and wearing seatbelts, things like that, behaviors that we wanted to change for public health reasons. But in more recent years, the environmental sector really started to apply the social marketing principles to a greater degree. And we'll talk a little bit about community-based social marketing, which is sort of a parallel methodology to social marketing and was developed to specifically address environmental behaviors. One key note about social marketing is that most people need more than information alone to change their behavior. So a small segment of the population, somewhere around 10 to 15%, and you can sort of see this in the chart here, will change behavior with information alone. So if you just tell them a fact or a figure, they may change their behavior based on that. And then there's some people, again, around 10 to 15%, that might not change their behavior unless a law or rule is enacted, like the wearing your seatbelt example. But most people, around 70 to 80%, will change their behavior if they get simply some more help. So rather than asking how can our customers change, social marketing asks what's in it for our customers and what's getting in their way of doing that behavior. So it addresses underlying reasons that people are not changing their behavior. And it's really a paradigm shift for utilities. And today I'm really talking about a campaign that I worked on for Seattle Public Utilities. And so utilities are often tempted to focus on tactics that provide information, such as like websites or flyers or fact sheets, but those materials often prove ineffective when developed without the understanding of the customers and community and the barriers they face. Side note, which I mentioned, that social marketing is different from social media. That social media is an aspect of the campaigns of social marketing. But we will talk a little bit more about that in a second. Just a note, they sound very similar. They have some parallels, but they're different. Okay. So I'm going to kind of talk a lot on this slide, but I'll try to give some examples as we walk through to not make it so dry. So these are the academically defined steps of community-based social marketing. I will also call it CBSM for short because it's really long to say community-based social marketing every time. So the first step is to target a behavior that must be chosen. It's important to note that that behavior needs to be indivisible. So it can't be divided into smaller behaviors. A good example to visualize the principle is the behavior of riding a bike to work. That might seem like it's one behavior, but really you need to have a bike. You need to know how to ride it. You need to have it properly maintained. You need to have the proper gear. You need to know how to go to work on that bike. You need to feel safe riding to work. And logistically, there are just a lot of elements, right? A lot of behaviors within just that one. Then it's important to gain some insights into the barriers that are preventing change and the motivators or benefits that could foster that change, which involves research. The most important thing is that once you've identified the behavior and understand who the audience is and isn't, asking those folks directly about the barriers and benefits. I'm going to provide some examples of that technique through the UW case study that we'll talk about, but I want to give another example in that if you identify pet waste in local parks as a behavior you'd like to tackle to address water quality, you'd want to engage residential customers with pets that are using that park. So it'd be important to take a cross-section of those customers for input. You need to have data on who they are, where they live. You'll want to know things like how aware are they of what's in their pet's waste and how it can affect water quality. You want to know what aspects of the local water body and community health are important to them. Is it the wildlife? Is it public health, aquatic recreation, exposure of children to potential pathogens, and what's getting in the way of them picking up their pet's waste? So once you know more about your intended audience, you can start to identify strategies. That's step 3 here. The strategies must be identified for barriers and potential motivators. Using the pet waste example, oftentimes the reason people aren't picking up their pet waste is because they forgot a bag, right? So being able to identify strategies to have those like dispensers in parks that have bags in them. Fourth step is piloting strategies, and that's key to ensure the right mix is in place. Evaluation is key, so building in measurements and metrics to gauge whether the interventions are working. We'll provide some examples of that potential evaluation during the case study. And once you've tested the strategy, you can adjust and try again if you aren't getting the behavior change that you're anticipating. Finally, you can implement your strategy on a larger scale. So it sounds like a lot of things, but it's actually a nice, pretty linear process for sort of research, testing, refining, and then more broadly implementing. I'm going to warn you now on this next slide, next 3 slides, 4. There's some gross images of sewers. Just be aware, I like to say it before I go on to the next one. It's not incredibly gross, but just in case, like to mention it. So this is a much used photo of a Seattle Public Utilities crew member working in one of the city's pump stations in Madison Park. A pump station is a facility that has one or many pumps that pump sewage uphill, so then it can flow downhill to the wastewater treatment plant. Have folks here taken a water quality class before and know about pump stations? Okay, cool. So anything other than toilet paper and human waste that gets flushed down the toilet, like things like paper towels, facial tissues, flushable wipes, which we'll talk about in a second, they all can cause clogs like this one. That's the majority of what's making up this image. And this is a really frequent problem throughout the city. So clogged pipes are really a behavior issue, right? So people are flushing things down the toilet, and that's costing operations and maintenance hours and dollars for the utility. It's causing a risk of sewer overflows into both Lake Washington and the Puget Sound. And it's causing health and safety risks for Seattle Public Utilities crews that have to go out and clean this out, as well as clean sewer overflows, which is just as fun as it sounds. And then SPU and King County spend countless hours and money to retrieve these materials and dispose of them. And it's really expensive to landfill this stuff because it's wet. So it weighs a ton, and it's really expensive to take it to the landfill. So I'm going to show this video, which is a few years old, but it was a tool that SPU developed to explain this problem. It was really done on a budget, so that's why it looks like it was. It was filmed on an intern's iPhone and edited on like Microsoft Movie Maker or something like that. It's kind of old, but okay, let me play it for you.
Hi, I'm Julie Howell. I'm with Seattle Public Utilities, and we're here looking at the ragging problem at the pump station. Rags, what we call rags, are all the trash and debris that clog the pump station, cause a huge headache, and run the risk of having a sewage overflow into the parking lot. We're here because the crews have to spend an awful lot of extra time cleaning up these rags. And we're here to find out more about how this all works.
Yeah, in the clogs we're finding a lot of paper, a lot of plastic, a lot of debris that has been thrown in the toilet and is ending up in the pump stations. Clear a clog, it's from an hour to an hour and a half.
How long would the pump station hold out if it was clogged and you didn't get here to clean it out?
Not very long. We have about an hour window or so to get this thing, to get these pumps up and running again. It would overflow, and it would some would be discharged in the parking lot here, and then there's actually an outfall across the street into the creek, which actually gets into Lake Washington.
Can you tell me how much sewage comes through this pump station?
When it's not raining, we get 130 gallons a minute coming through the station. Yeah, putting anything into the sink or into the toilet that shouldn't go in there is going to cause a problem for us in the pump stations. They should discard them in a trash can and not into the water, into the toilets, into the sinks.
To the next. Hold on. Do you want to watch it again?
We try to get out of there.
Yeah. No, why it's not advancing yet.
Let's try.
Escaping from.
Oops, I escaped too far.
Oh, I guess I'm going to put my presentation there first. My other videos probably won't be as problematic because they're actually behind there. Oh, perfect. Okay.
So we were.
Yeah.
There.
Perfect. Another gross picture for you. So this photo shows trash taken from the wastewater system at Brightwater Treatment Plant. This is only from a few days of operations. And you can't really see the scale, but that's like as tall as I am. So you can see there are a lot of wipes and other debris. There's plastics, straws, a lot of tampon applicators, a lot of wipes. This is what it looks like. And it's something people don't think about often, right? Like it goes down the toilet and it's gone. It has to go somewhere and someone has to clean it up. So this map shows Seattle's wastewater pump stations. There are close to 70 managed by SBU, 30 managed by King County, and another 20 managed by other entities, such as the University of Washington. You'll see a couple of dots around the campus. This is a really complex system of more than 100 pump stations, all moving waste to one treatment facility. And it means a lot can go wrong when there are clogs in the system, especially when it's raining and there's a lot of stormwater in the system as well. That's when we really have risk of clogs and overflows. So the problem is wastewater is not a compelling topic that most people think about. And it's out of sight, out of mind. While our earlier materials had done a great job of showcasing this problem, moving the needle hasn't really been easy on understanding barriers and benefits associated with flushing behavior, especially during COVID when there were toilet paper shortages and people started using products like flushable wipes more frequently or buying paper towels and using them when there was toilet paper shortages and all sorts of fun things. So talking a little bit about the research that we did, back in 2017, we did research on flushing behaviors and benefits, and we wanted to find out which audience would have the most impact on changing flushing behavior, especially when it came to the growing use of so-called flushable wipes. So we surveyed and interviewed stakeholders of 4 high potential impact audience groups, and you can see those here. So we looked at retirement community residents because we knew that that community was using wipes frequently. We talked to gastroenterology clinic staff who we had surveyed, and in the past they had often prescribed their patients to use flushable wipes ahead of procedures, and knew that then those patients were going on to use them past the procedure. We talked to childcare facility staff, also a group who uses a lot of wipes every day. And then we talked to multifamily residents through universities because we were seeing a lot of clogs in pump stations in those areas around universities. And we knew that the residents, they're not responsible for pipe maintenance because you're renting, like a single family homeowner would be. And there was a ton of marketing to this group by wipes companies. So we went ahead and did interviews and surveys and ranked the 4 potential audiences on 3 criteria: size and impact on the system, ease of reach, and receptiveness and scale of their barriers. Multifamily residents near universities ranked highest for all 3 criteria. They have a relatively high number of respondents we got a relatively high number of respondents to our survey from this audience group, and they indicated that they regularly used personal wet wipes. Over half reported that they use them for use at the toilet, 67%, and that they dispose of them in the toilet, 35%. This was back in 2017. Childcare staff were fairly easy to reach and receptive. However, there was way less impact because they pretty much weren't flushing wipes. They had already flushed them, got clogged, seen impacts, and were trained not to do that. Retirement community residents, pretty similar situation. They already knew not to flush them, and they were also smaller sized communities. Multifamily residents near universities was way larger of an audience group. And then gastroenterology clinic staff were hard to reach and not as receptive, probably not surprising. So after we identified college students as the highest impact group in 2018, we partnered with UW to roll out a social marketing campaign to test outreach and engagement strategies around what not to flush in on-campus housing and off-campus housing with the Greek system. We distributed a baseline survey to the UW housing students via email and received 1,700 responses, showing that many students were using flushing wipes and other products, which was reflected of those results from our previous research. And then after the baseline survey, we started testing campaign outreach elements. So in the communal style dorms, we provided stall posters in each restroom, and in the suite style dorms, we tabled in the lobby, and there's an image here where we provided free small restroom bins with a do not flush sticker on them, since students were only provided, I don't know if this is still true, but students were only provided one trash can when they moved into their dorms, and we realized that a lot of them didn't have a trash can in the bathroom. So in all the buildings, we also provided door hangers on each of the dorm rooms to further illustrate what shouldn't be flushed. A month after the engagement, we sent out a post survey, and we found the students were still flushing products, regardless of the intervention method. And so the post-campaign survey showed an increased rate of knowledge on the topics. So students that talked to us or saw the door hangers understood the messaging and thought it was easy to understand, but they reported the same rate of flushing wipes and other products as before. So we had created these outreach materials. This is the stall poster and the door hanger. We created these based on the outreach we had previously done with other audiences, like single family residents and businesses, and it wasn't resonating with the college audience. So we thought might be time to go back to this community-based social marketing method and sort of start over with what the messaging is going to look like. So we applied for a round of grant funding from King County and started another phase of work to build on what we learned in the 2018 study and to better understand what would motivate students and other young adults in multifamily housing, not just around universities, but more universally, to stop flushing wipes and other products. So following the steps of CBSM that we talked about earlier, the first step in the new campaign was to hold focus groups, specifically with students who use wipes, to better understand how to tailor our messaging and outreach approach. The focus groups were separated by those who use menstrual products and those who didn't, so they would have comfort talking about those products. I want to be clear that folks who identify as male use wipe products. And at an increasing rate. I think a lot of times there's a sort of a expectation or judgment that is primarily on folks who use menstrual products that are causing these problems, and that is not true. So what we've seen is that there's a ton of marketing by wipes companies specifically focused on young adult males, and that our survey results show that they're using the products at higher rates than ever before, especially compared to 5 years ago. So we completed our focus groups at the University of Washington and with Seattle U, and we found the following barriers and benefits. Barriers to throwing products in the garbage revolved around the themes of cleanliness, culture, and convenience, which included that personal wet wipes provided better cleaning than toilet paper. Participants who used wipes typically grew up using them or were marketed to around the time when they were moving out of their family home. People flush wipes because the packaging stated that you could. Go ahead.
Why, or have you ever thought about like trying to
like, I don't know, lobby businesses or people who like say that it's flushable, even though it's not flushable?
That's a great question. So for people online, I think you could probably hear that because you're close to the mic, but why don't we just have it not say flushable? Great question. So we have tried this. So there's actually a global consortium right now of utilities, counties, cities, everywhere from City of London to Australia to the US that are working like on making the legal change to using the word flushable, making that a legally defined term. Because right now, the definition of flushable is it can be flushed. So that means it can clear your toilet. That is the definition. And so they're allowed to use that word. There was legislation that passed in Washington about a year and a half ago that required some labeling. It required an icon that shows a person, putting the wipe in the toilet with a little X out symbol through it. But it's on the back of the packaging and they can still technically put flushable, even if they have that icon that shows that you can't flush it. Yeah. And they can also put words on there like biodegradable. As many of you probably are aware, that's a greenwashing term, doesn't have any legality when it comes to products like this. So people think, oh, I flush it and immediately breaks down like toilet paper, which is not true. A lot of these products have microplastics in them. They're made through a process that essentially makes them not break down at all, which I will show an example of. But yeah, great question. There is a whole team of countries trying to change it. But yeah, right now, that's where we're at. And then you can see some of the benefits here as well. One of the benefits the students saw was not having to submit a maintenance request and have the potential embarrassment of an overflowing toilet when the maintenance person comes to your room to have to fix that. Environmental benefits like reducing water body pollution was a big one for the folks in the focus groups, and avoiding using products with microplastics. So the second step was to partner with three schools. So I already mentioned Seattle Pacific University, Seattle U, and then University of Washington to develop strategies for reaching students. So the goal for each school remained consistent to provide outreach to students, educate them on the correct flushing behavior, promote behavior change, and ultimately see a decrease in the number of clogs at the pump stations. Each college had a little bit of a different setup in terms of on-campus housing and bathroom layout. So we did a slightly customized approach throughout the different campaigns. I want to show this social media video that we made back in 2015, at the same time as the last video I showed, because it shows the difference between a flushable wipe and toilet paper. And this was, yes. So this is a principle that we built off on the campaign. Let's see if that's great. And we really wanted to focus on these different campaign intervention methods. So we focused on social media ads, stall posters, and what we call toilet stickers. We'll talk about that in a second, and then doing some tabling with toilet paper. So here, I'm going to talk through each of these strategies. So here are the updated stall posters based on the focus group feedback. Stall posters are a useful tool for behavior change because they address the behavior we'd like to change while the student is conducting the behavior. Sometimes that's easier to do. Like if you think about recycling and composting, you can have someone at the bin that tells you where the things should go. Obviously, when someone's using the bathroom, that's harder to do. So this is our, the best thing we can do, which is to have that there by the toilet. The posters educate students on what should or shouldn't be flushed, and it also shows the negative impact that the products had on the environment. Again, all of this sort of encompasses the feedback we got in the focus groups. The Seattle Pacific University poster, this one here, we actually partnered with an undergraduate design student who was interested in the project. I love her unhappy toilet paper. And so we left a little bit of flexibility in our approach to get community input along the way like that. Our digital engagement strategy included YouTube and Instagram ads, as well as Spotify audio ads. These platforms have a high utilization rate by the target audience. I probably don't have to tell you that. And in the focus groups, we asked students where they paid the most attention on advertising in social media. They mentioned YouTube and Spotify most frequently, since they are listening while they're studying. Again, you probably do that too. So here's our YouTube ad. I told them to make the fish cry more when we made that. And then here's an example of our Instagram ads. So the top example shows it's a carousel swipe ad, and it shows the movement of a wipe through the sewer system, similar to what you saw on the stall poster. The bottom ad also directly addresses the focus group feedback that students didn't understand that toilet paper and wipes are not made of the same material and the impacts on the ecosystem. And then I'm going to also play the audio. Hopefully we'll see if this works, of the Spotify ad.
Hey there, are you still flushing wipes down the drain? Well, they're probably clogging pipes and leaking sewage into Puget Sound right now. Ew. Unlike toilet paper, wipes clog pipes, even the flushable ones. Sewage can back up through your toilet and into our waterways, harming wildlife. Keep your toilet and waterways flowing freely by tossing your wipes in the trash, not down the drain. Tap to learn more from Seattle Public Utilities.
Okay. And lastly, we did tabling events. I know this is probably a long shot, but did any of you ever see this toilet paper on campus if you were living in a dorm in the last 2 years? Okay. I was holding out hope that maybe someone had. But the main goal of these toilet paper giveaways was to have a one-on-one conversation with students. We had the shaker jars, similar to what you saw in the video. We use the incentive of free toilet paper, since, again, I don't know if this has changed, but then UW didn't provide that to housing students. And we heard from them that, like, it was an issue, like that people would take it from other parts of campus or, you know, cause problems. So we provided this free toilet paper, and we put a wrap on the outside that had this image that we also used on social media on it, about not flushing wipes. And we, let's see, anything else I want to mention? Yeah, we had a lot of great conversations with students. You know, most people are like, oh, okay, cool, toilet paper, thank you. But for the evaluation, we did a baseline survey via email with support from our campus, the 3 campus partners. Both surveys offered a drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards, which we found to be an effective incentive for students during the 2018 campaign. One of the questions from the survey asked, in your bathroom, are there signs about flushing only toilet paper? The blue bars show the responses before outreach and posting signage, and the gray bars show the results after the campaign. So you can see that at Seattle Pacific, there was a 22% increase in students seeing signage, and at Seattle U, there was a 50% increase. Note that we don't have the UW post-survey results, unfortunately, because of a scheduling issue before students last year left for summer break. So we ended up surveying students this year, but most of those students weren't in the on-campus housing last year. So we got really not cohesive data, which is unfortunate, but we drove data from these 2 schools. So similar to 2018, people saw the campaign, they saw these posters, they saw social media ads. Did they actually change their behavior this time? Yes, they did. We asked students where they put wipes before the campaign and after. Again, this is all self-reported data, but the blue bars show before outreach and the gray is post. And we were excited to see that Seattle Pacific, they had a 17% decrease in flushing behavior, and the Seattle U students were even higher at 19% decrease. In a perfect world, all students would, stop flushing these products. But we realize how many barriers there are to doing the correct behavior in this case. We've also seen from previous outreach to businesses and multifamily and single family residents that even a small decrease in flushing behavior can have a really positive reduction in clogs in the sewer system. So even though these percentages may sound small, they're actually pretty significant when it comes to, if you think about that amount of trash. So I want to give one more summary slide of the results of our campaign compared to our initial goals. We weren't sure how many students would interact with the social media campaigns. So we had a relatively conservative goal, really low goal of 200 interactions per campaign. And we were impressed by the outcomes that we had there. And we also had 103% increase in web traffic to the SPU wastewater website. That's where all the social media ads directed people to. And then again, I talked about what for us was an ambitious goal of 15% decrease in flushing, considering that our 2018 campaign had a 0% decrease. But as was shown on the previous slide, we exceeded that goal. You might be wondering about actual impact on the pump stations and clogs in the system. There are a lot of challenges to getting that impact data, which is why we have to go with this self-reported outcomes. One of those being, especially at UW, the school maintains its own pump stations. And so the reporting they do when they get clogs and maintenance data is kind of all over the place. There's not like a specific code if there's something that's a clog. In a perfect world, we would have them like weigh the clogs and see the reduction over time. But all we really have is sort of anecdotal conversations with them that say, oh yeah, we had way fewer clogs this month. And so that's a benefit and it feels good, but it's not, that data that we like to see. We also use the student maintenance request logs for data, where we went in, and again, there wasn't like a code that the maintenance team uses, that the HFS maintenance team uses to say there's a clogged toilet. So we had to read through data that students had submitted around clogs. There were things like, I flushed an entire roll of paper towels down the toilet and it clogged, or I put my bowl of ramen in the toilet and it clogged, all sorts of things, but it's all like comments. So it's hard to actually clean that data enough to say, okay, did we actually change behavior with this? And as you know, some of the reasons for reporting those clogs could be inaccurate. So we have to just rely on this survey data. So in summary, following the community-based social marketing model resulted in better engagement and behavior change than when we did that 2018 campaign. Questions? Yeah.
I have a question. Okay. So I guess could you explain a little bit more like the differences between like the first campaign and the second campaign? Because it seemed like in the first campaign, the second campaign, there's still like informational stuff happening, but I guess I'm confused like what are the behavioral change?
Yeah. So the question is, explain a little bit more the difference between the 2018 campaign and the one that we did the last 2 or so years. Yeah. So the 2018 campaign, the stall posters and the door hangers I showed were really based on the information that we used to talk to single family residents who had control over their pipes. So if we said, don't flush these things, they're going to cause clogs, which is pretty much all we said in those 2018 materials. They were like, oh yeah, I don't want to have to pay, $10,000 for someone to come out and replace my sewer pipes because they're clogged. But that messaging didn't resonate at all with the students in that 2018 campaign. And when we had the focus groups, the students really said, we want to know the why. Like, this is something that's embarrassing to put in a trash can that I have shared, in a suite style dorm. I need to know why that's even important to consider doing that, or to stop using a product. And so through the materials, even though it seems like just a slight tweak in the materials that we use in the more recent campaign, they were really based on better explaining the why and sort of piquing interest about, oh, I haven't heard of this. as someone who at UW and at the other schools generally cares about the environment, right? Like it's overall, that's true for the college population, based on what we heard in the focus groups. Let's talk about that. Like, let's give them something that says, oh, this is a harmful thing for the environment if you're doing this, or this is something that is going to be embarrassing if you have to have someone come and clean out your toilet. And during those focus groups, we showed a variety of materials to them. So the ones that we landed on for that campaign were the final versions, but we showed them like shock content of like those gross images and sewer overflows and things like that. We showed them kind of more humorous content. Those things didn't resonate. The things that resonated the most were just tell us why, tell us what happens, tell us the impact on the environment. Yeah.
Do you have other campaigns where social marketing and stuff was effective?
Yeah, great question. I work on a variety of campaigns that use this general approach. And one of them that I'm working on right now is around reusable food service packaging. So trying to get consumers to remember to bring their coffee cup to the coffee shop, right? Bring their reusable cup instead of a single-use cup. I work closely with the utility when the bag ban was initiated. It's like, how do we get people to remember to put their reusable bag in the cart? Like, people have plenty of them. The issue is not that people don't have the bag, right? How do we get them to put it in the car? Then remember to grab it from the car, take it in the store. So a lot of times you see that signage like on the cart sort of return thing at a grocery store that says, did you remember your bag? And so there's a lot of ways to apply the methodology beyond. This is sort of like actually a more narrow way to apply it. Yeah. But it's really researching your audience, figuring out what's going to click for them, motivate them. Sometimes it's like I showed in the graph, sometimes you really need a law or something like that to be in place to change behavior for most people. If you give them what they need to address those barriers, they can make that change. Other questions? Yeah.
I was wondering how you think budget like influences social marketing campaigns, like institutional budget versus just like grassroots or like student-led objectives.
Yeah. So this can be expensive to do, that's for sure. But it doesn't have to be. Things like social media marketing, very inexpensive. And if you do a little research ahead of time to say, okay, what do I want to actually include in those versus, oh, I'm just going to put together an Instagram post and post it and pay for it as an ad. But things like social media marketing are, again, inexpensive to do. And a lot of this can be done based on existing research. So a lot of times, utilities, cities, counties don't have a lot of funding for research, and they're looking to an institution or a college to do that baseline research or reference a study that a university has done to sort of start as their basis and kind of jump into this process and like the design and pilot based on the barriers and benefits they're seeing in previous research and studies. So that's when we kind of referenced some previous research, but then did the focus groups to get sort of more up-to-date input, especially because things were changing so much with toilet use during COVID. So we wanted to know, how that was sort of changing things. Yeah,
as opposed to like coming up grads and stuff, I was just going to ask a little bit about your background. I was going to ask if you've worked in any other positions that prepared you for addressing sustainability in corporations or businesses.
Yeah, sort of. So I before working at Cascadia, as we mentioned in the beginning, graduated from Western Washington University with a degree in environmental science, but I had taken sociology classes because I just found them super interesting. I didn't really know about this field or much about environmental consulting and know that those things would actually cross over for me in my career. But I interned when I was a senior at NOAA in fish genetics and researching fish genetics. And when I was working in a lab, I thought, this isn't so much for me. I'd rather talk to people and be out in the community. And I'm interested in, working with corporations, businesses on what they can do to be more sustainable. And that's what led me to be more interested in Cascadia. So I didn't really have a role between that internship and my job at Cascadia in anything else like this. Yeah. You have a question too?
Yeah, does Cascadia work with private companies as well as like public institutions and stuff? And how does that differ?
Yeah, good question. So at Cascadia, we have 3 lines of business, so sort of 3 focus areas that we provide consulting on. One is climate action planning, where we're really working with cities and counties primarily, so municipalities, to work on, as well as universities too, to work on their climate action plans. So forecast the impacts on them from climate change and what they can do to respond to that. Another line of our business is waste and materials management. And that line of business is really folks going through trash, figuring out what it's made up of, trash recycling, compost, and helping municipalities as well as private companies build plans for how to divert more. So compost more, reduce waste, recycle more, based on actual data of what's being thrown away. We do that on a city level, like for the whole city of Seattle, for example, but we would also do it for like a private company that's looking to meet zero waste goals. And then our last line of business, the one I work in and what this work sort of sits under, is community engagement around environmental topics. So our team does that environmental education on recycling, composting, water conservation, energy, pollution prevention that this lives under. And we're working for a variety of clients on that. We work with nonprofits, we work with private companies to educate and make sort of outreach plans for their employees. And then we do a lot of this work for municipalities. And so I primarily just work with Seattle Public Utilities on a variety of campaigns. And the education campaigns I work on are primarily for adults. Like I don't work on a lot of like school education things. Yeah.
A question for you, Rebecca. So obviously you're talking about social marketing. And I'm wondering in your campaign with doors, did you ever consider whether that peer influence might be a suitable approach? And we talk about oftentimes with social marketing, like normalizing behavior among peer groups.
Yeah. Yeah. Because this is sort of a sensitive topic and people don't talk about it, you know, like there are applying social marketing to a lot of other things, like bring your own mug, right? To the coffee shop example. That's something that it can definitely be a peer motivated thing. You're going with your friend to a coffee shop, they're bringing a cup, you're seeing it and thinking, oh, I can do that. But with this, it's such a private action that it's hard to get much sort of organic social structure built around it. I love talking about it, obviously, but most people don't. So it's something that we considered, but that, you know, it's hard to do. We do that a little bit more with the single family, especially when we're talking about like baby wipes and things, because that is more of a sort of sharing with other people who are parents that this is an issue sort of thing. So we use it a little bit, but not a lot with this strategy with the multifamily residents. Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to babies, people love to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. People won't talk about babies all the time and they'll talk about flushable wipes and I think it's why it's not as much of a problem when it comes to baby wipes as it is for like adult flushable branded wipes. Though I should mention that they are almost the exact same product in many ways. They scent them differently, but yeah. Any other questions?
There's a question online. You should ask this question. You showed your graphic earlier, and George was curious. You know, at what point in social marketing do you realize that show me and help me aren't enough? And then when those aren't enough, then what is sort of the next step?
Yeah, so you kind of have to have research, right, to show you that those things aren't enough. So for example, with the bag ban that went into effect in Seattle many years ago, there was litter research done and water wave research done to show, look at how many plastic bags are making their way into storm drains or turning into litter on the side of the road, right? How many plastic bags are causing issues at the recycling material recovery facility and are contaminants. And so that research was kind of done, and that was used to make the policy happen, because at that point, not very many people were bringing their own bags to stores, and campaigns had been done, but there wasn't a lot of behavior change happening. So I can see something similar happening here, where, you know, this research is being shared relatively broadly and is used for Seattle Public Utilities to go to the legislature and say, hey, this is an issue. And this research is being done in lots of other cities in Washington, as well as I mentioned globally. So I think, I'm hoping that there will be a policy change around this eventually, but this is kind of our stopgap in the meantime, is doing this education and outreach until that policy happens. Yeah. And you had a question as well?
Not kind of answered it actually.
Okay, awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. It's been fantastic to learn more about what you're doing, and thank you for sharing with them.
Yeah, thank you all. Especially for hanging in there for an hour talking about.